Welcome to Revive Ministries Podcast. This month can be filled of fond, chilled childhood memories or pain. Unfortunately, today we start December remembering and reminding ourselves that spending alone is not always by choice. And I'm joined with a new guest, Emily, to talk about finding hope even in our bleakest hours. Thank you, Emily, for joining us and sharing your insight. It's never easy to talk about these things, but I think it's very necessary. Thank you, Emily.
You're welcome. I'm happy to be here.
I want to share with those who are listening in the States. Also, I encourage those outside the States to find some resource, because support comes in all different ways. But for those in the States, 1-800-273-8255 is the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. And I still encourage, resources. They may be short to come by, but you'll be surprised at some resources out there that you haven't considered. Emily, I know you're new, but we always start with a quote, because I always say that people say better than I do, and I think that's a humbling thing to say. But Desmond Tutu said it this way. He says, "Hope is being able to see that there is light despite all of the darkness." What comes to mind? It's kind of poetic, but what comes to mind when you hear that quote?
Oh, that quote's powerful to me. I had the opportunity to go to South Africa. And when I travel, I like to learn all I can about where I'm going before I go there, so that I can know what to look for and what I want to experience. And I read one of his books on my way over there, where he was talking about I think they called them tribunals that they had after the apartheid, where anybody who was on the other side could come to them before this panel of people and confess to what they did, essentially, and ask for forgiveness. And they would give them the forgiveness. They didn't put them in prison. They just forgave them. And the things that they did were horrendous. I couldn't even get all the way through the book because it was just gut-wrenching, the things that happened. But I was so impressed by all the light these people on the panel could actually see, that it wasn't the end from this tragedy that happened, that there still was another day, there still was light, and there still was love.
Yeah, a lot of times when it comes to empathy, it's not so much seeing where they're at, it's seeing where they could be. It's like, it's just, you see people out there with recovery or mental health or substance use, whatever it may be, or you kind of see them at that moment. But then if you look at the character, it's like they're not defined by that event, but it does get messy a lot of times. And sometimes we overlook things. I do commend those who can forgive. There's a lot of healing in forgiveness. And one of the things we forget to forgive enough is ourselves. I want to, the concept, I wanted to ask you, when it comes to, a lot of times when we say I'm falling apart, but we kind of forget that sometimes when we fall, we learn a lot, and we can actually fall forward. Some people talk about, a lot of times when we think about failing, it's always like you think of the standardized, at least for me in the States, we have these standardized tests. Really doesn't really show a lot for me personally, but really what it does show is areas that I'm missing, and learning and having the grasp of the understanding is a lot more valuable than just testing well. So for me in life, it's even more critical. And I just want to kind of get your take on finding hope, which a lot of times when we think about hope, one thing I was thinking about, I want your insight. Uncertainty it is the only way that hope can also exist. Hope cannot exist without uncertainty. If we knew what was going to happen, there was no need for hope. So it's kind of that weird thing. So when it comes to finding hope, I want to hear your take. When finding hope, what does this mean to you personally, Emily, and why is it important to us?
I think it's important to always be open to all the good that there is available in life. Yeah. Sometimes we'll when you mention falling apart, we don't physically actually fall apart into pieces onto the floor. Mm-hmm. We just feel like we're not together. Mm-hmm. And we want to be somehow pulled together. And love can do that, and it can start as simply as self-love. Mm-hmm. That if you say, but I don't have anybody to love me, well, yes, you do. You have yourself. And that's the most important person. And when you can start with you, mm-hmm. and really fully embrace yourself, love yourself for who you are, forgive yourself for anything that you don't want to be or that don't think you should be, and then just focus on any place that you can find love in your life. And the more you focus on it, the more it kind of magnifies. It fills up more space. So it supports you in a way that holds you together when you feel like you're falling apart.
A lot of times we don't allow ourselves time to process through healing. Mm-hmm. We're just trying to rush through it. And sometimes, a lot of times the journey, the process is the healing. A lot of times we're mm-hmm. Because, there's always that stage where you want to plan. There's the 5 stages: the non-contemplative, the contemplative, the plan, and then the action, and then the maintaining of that plan. But one constant that Albert Einstein always says is that the one constant in life is change. So how mm-hmm. do we adapt? So the thing is that journey kind of cycles. So good, change can be, whether it's good or not, it's stressful. It can be, it doesn't. So I feel embracing not only the journey, it seems so cliche, but embracing the process of healing. That mm-hmm. is truly healing. I know there's parts of even myself that I still want to get better. One of the things is I'm still practicing is being present. A lot of times that's a lot of us, we get this urgency. I come back from work, I'm like, I need to, work stays at work. I mm-hmm. have to spend my present time with a person like my wife or my family or friends or something. But a lot of times there's always an urgency on what I should do, what I need to do, what I have to do. But leaving things incomplete, and this is what leads me to this quote, and it's kind of haunting. It says, leave everything undefined, including yourself. Befriend uncertainty. Fall in love with mystery. Kneel at the altar of not knowing. Give your questions time to breathe, and the answers will find you. Jeff Foster, man, this quote kind of whether you're faith-based or not, and this Revive Ministries does not proselytize, but I do encourage finding why you do what you do. A lot of times there's a purpose-driven approach when you're trying to heal, can be very helpful. When you hear this quote, what comes to mind, Emily?
I think that it's important to be able to focus on the moment, to be able to stay present. And I think that that's something that I'm seeing falling away in society right now. Yeah. You can go we're not going to many restaurants right now. There's mm-hmm. everything that's going on in the world. But if you go to a restaurant, you can look at a table and everybody at the table is sitting there staring at their food, at their phone. While they're waiting for their food. Yeah, exactly. And I can't tell you how many people I'm always looking where I'm walking, because I have a little bit of a balance issue with a wobbly knee. Mm. And so I'm very, very careful when I'm walking. But I can't tell you how many people are not looking at me. They're looking at their phone, and they'll walk right into you if you don't get out of the way. So staying present is so important, because you're kind of not there when your mind is all wound up, and it's not even a phone. It can be a game, or it can be something you're watching on TV. It's very important to take responsibility for yourself, so that you can see what's going on, and things don't have to be the way that you think that they should be.
Yeah.
I've been working really hard on eliminating that word from my vocabulary, because
Yeah.
should
Yeah.
isn't helpful.
No.
So don't think about the way things should be. Think about the way things are and how you can best deal with the way things are with love.
Yeah, and a lot of times I just feel, because I'm at that age when I remember when there wasn't cell phones and when there wasn't computers were dialing. I'm at that age where I had that transition. So, like, I had a time where literally you couldn't just look at your phone. Looking at a
Mm-hmm.
flip phone wasn't like it looked weird, but now like everything's on there, so it almost becomes social acceptable to be like this because you're busier. And I feel the busyness has actually kind of skewed how we view things. Like if I'm more busy, I'm more valuable, and it has kind of shifted. And unfortunately, I see it more and more. So the grind, I'm hustling to get, what I need, but at the same time, you're losing presence with your family, with your friends. And, I I know that, I believe that you're on the Pacific side of the ocean, if I'm correct.
Yes, I'm the middle of the Pacific, actually.
Okay. Well, south of that, there's this word. It's called murma. My wife has this book, and it's kind of funny, untranslatable words, and it's from Australia. And it's kind of random, but it's to search for something in the water with only your feet. I found that kind of funny. But you ever do that? You have to really focus, on one thing. You can't like go elsewhere in your mind. But what I like about it is when I was a child, those things were highly I don't know, entertaining, just the simplest things, it kind of gradually, everything got easier and faster to get, everything was, when, we knew, technology was useful, but now it's become more of an excuse not to communicate. So many platforms to communicate, but we do it more and more. I don't know. I think, George Bernard Shaw said something, the communication, a lot of times people assume communication happens, but it really doesn't. I'm paraphrasing, but I remember him really emphasizing even back then when he was around that communication was diminishing. And I can't imagine if he saw things now. And Emily, I want to give this opportunity. You have the book, and if you could share a little bit about that, and also your own experience and what you have witnessed when it comes to uncertainty, and when you have little to no hope, and what have you found that has helped you or someone through it all, because it's reflective. Like I could tell my story, but you also see it in others as you kind of continue the process. So go ahead, Emily.
Well, I have seen uncertainty, especially with people who are dealing with grief, because they're at a totally different place that they were in life from, it could have been just moments ago or a day or so ago, and all of a sudden they're going, okay, what do I do now?
Yeah.
And a lot of times they don't have a whole lot of hope, because they say, well, in my cases, I had 2 husbands die. And each time I loved them so deeply. After they died, it kind of hard to imagine how I could be, how do I go forward? How am I going to be able to not have somebody give me a hug and snuggle with me and talk to me deeply? And that's real common when people are grieving. And when you can learn the value of self-love, like we were talking about before, and how important you are to yourself, you can be good to everybody else by doing that. It's like that thing when you get on a plane and they tell you to put the oxygen mask on yourself first. You can't help anybody else if you can't breathe.
Yeah.
And a lot of times in grief, people feel like they can't breathe. And there are ways that they can handle with it. I do writing. It helps me a lot. And I show other people how to write to help them with that, because that uncertainty can be kind of paralyzing.
Yeah.
So
I see it a lot of times with Well, obviously grief, and also when it comes to any aspect of a trauma or anything like that, it's easier to help someone or distract someone else and avoid your own self-care a lot. And I see it. They're wonderful out there. They're advocating, and I'll admit I got lost in it too, because it is kind of healing. But at the end of the day, having self-love. I remember telling my friend he lost his father last year, and he was on the podcast. He's going to be on for this month again. His father on Christmas. He's a good friend. He was actually my best man in the wedding. And I told him, you're gonna get a lot of people around you, supporting you, but I'm here for you. And I also told him the hardest thing is not right now. It's so busy, but the hardest thing is the day after, when that Monday, the day after, when everything starts to get back to normal, and you're like, well, he's not here, so it's loss. It takes time. It's a process, and for me, well, you avoid that process. You try to be strong. It will find you later on, unfortunately. So I totally agree with what you're saying.
Go
ahead.
In that time period when the funeral's over, the flowers are wilted, everybody went home, and you're sitting there by yourself, the best thing somebody can do for you is to recognize you, talk to you, and say something significant. So many times people say, I'm sorry for your loss, and that means absolutely nothing. No. But if you sit there and say, in the case of your friend, I remember when your dad did this really cool thing that really helped me out, and it was such a wonderful thing, that's going to make him smile. And that's going to help break that tension that builds up when you just feel like everything's not working. Yeah. You can do things to positively support someone.
You're hypersensitive when you lose someone, of how many talking points people just shove at you. Like,
oh yeah.
I'm like, I'm sorry for your loss. I'm like, what does that mean? I haven't seen you. You just came and then you're gone. Like, and then whenever I used to call you, never. And it's not to get bitter about these things, but defining what support really is. It's also not also having all the answers. That's kind of is not helpful either. A lot of times, just being present, like we said before, is hugely healing. A lot of times, I just all I wanted for people is to treat me like Robert. Sometimes when something it's not like I'm some strange person now. Nothing has changed. Obviously, a life event has drastically changed, or if I'm going through some trauma, but I'm still who I am. A lot of people just like, oh, he's suffering, so we need to. I feel people forget how insightful a lot of people are, and these micro little attempts really kind of backfire. Treat me like me. Like, sometimes it's just being like I just make fun of him. Tell you the truth, my friend. You have to. You can't. Every day can't be a crisis. It kind of makes it more. You become closer, because at the end of the day, if you're gonna have an arm's length approach and you're gonna always coddle, I feel anyone will feel that. Maybe they don't recognize what it is at first, if they're just bombarded by the grief, but later on they're gonna be like, well, why can't you treat me like I was before? But it is difficult. Anything else you want to share, Emily, in regards to what you've seen or experienced yourself?
Well, what you're saying means a lot. I see a lot so many times when people, like when my first husband that died, Jacques, when he died, we were a very prominent couple in the community we were in, and all of a sudden I wasn't a couple anymore. Mm-hmm. And so I wasn't included in the things that I'd always been included. We were married 22 years and I'd been included, and we did everything together. Mm-hmm. And when he wasn't there, it was like I wasn't invited anymore. And I thought, wait a minute, I'm still here. I'm alive. I would appreciate your friendship and your compassion. And it just didn't happen.
Yeah.
And so I recognized that I had to start doing something about that myself, that they weren't going to come to me, or that they showed that they didn't come to me. So what was I going to do? And I figured it out. So when Ron died, I thought, that's just not going to happen this time. I'm going to stay close to all the people I'm close to now. And I'm going to make new friends too. And it's going to be a different world with a lot less heartache by being able to stay close to people.
Yeah, I feel like for at least my personality, I'm annoyingly intentional. So a lot of times I'm just I don't know, for me a lot of times when it comes to some of the pain I've been through, I've learned a lot about how connected we are. When it comes to even the substance use, and it wasn't a major thing for me, but some people I don't are not here because of it. And so I think of substance use, and I say I was reading that they assume back that the opposite of addiction is sobriety, and they said now there's studies that say it's connection. It's not sobriety, because we're asking sometimes the wrong question. We're like, well, you shouldn't do this. Why are you doing this? Instead of what happened. A lot of times, I remember when I was in my teens, in my 20s, a lot of things had happened at that time. I said, I want to desensitize the sensitivities, because I thought that was strength. I was in the military. It was during 9/11. I was all there. That was all that time. So I was just like, desensitize the sensitivities, because I thought that was strength. And at the end of the day, you kind of forget how to feel things, how to process emotions, and later on it does kind of make it difficult relationship wise later on, because you don't know, because you're trying to protect yourself. Because when you try to protect yourself so much, you also kind of push a lot of things out. So I do like what you said in the beginning about forgiveness, because forgiveness a lot of times is overlooked. We're like, oh, well, if it's someone else who did wrong to me, Desmond Tutu, like you mentioned South Africa, people might say that's not rational. But like, if you were to go to every trial for everything that he did, that country will be shattered, if you really think about it, because there's so much pain. And I'm not taking a political side on this, but I do recognize forgiveness as being very healing for any aspect. And on top of that is gratitude. Yeah, I feel that gratitude gets overlooked when it comes to, journaling and how much of an impact. Because when I do groups, I never see a group do well when all we talk about how bad our life is. So I feel, in that regard, I feel gratitude is an amazing tool, just like forgiveness. But I'm just impressed by your story and as what you've shared so far. Is there anything else you would like to share as we wrap up today? I want to actually talk more about your book, and then and also we could at the end, you could send me and I'll share it in the notes. So for those who want to know more about your story. Emily, as we wrap up, I just want to ask you to share a little bit more about your books, and you could share with the link and everything, and it'll be in the notes for those listening. Yeah, just share a little bit what inspires you to write the book, and anything else you want to share with those who are listening today.
I was inspired to write my book when a dear friend of my husband's died, and I was concerned about his wife, because they were much younger than we were, and he just died out of the blue. So I started writing to her, and I ended up writing 52 different cards to her over the first year. So I sent her one every week, and I found that the contents for those cards made a good outline for a book. And I felt like it could help a whole lot more people than just her. So that's where my book came from. And I also include at the end of each one of the chapters something active that the reader can do to help them deal with their grief or their loss, which is something that people do have kind of a challenge when they're grieving. It's like, okay, I feel lousy. What can I do? And I say, well, try this. And so the book really helps along that line. So I really would love for anybody who's dealing with grief or loss to read it. Or if you know someone who has someone close to them who died, it's a really good like bereavement gift to give to them.
That's, I like how you make how you have the individual go through it as an active participant of their grief. A lot of times it has to be, especially for sustained healing and consistency. It is nice to have that support, but when you're actively participating in whatever healing, it does better, I feel, from my experience. Yes. And I just want to say thank you, Emily. I'm sorry for the technical hiccups. I hope I could clean it all up. It was a lot of rain here, and then I guess it didn't like it. So anyway, I just want to say thank you, Emily. It was really a pleasure to have you on and to share a little bit about, especially during this December when this uploads, just how much we just assume if we're in a happy family that everyone else is happy during that time, but we understand it isn't so. But we just, finding hope is sometimes really just centering and self-love, as you say, and also being present and understanding that you could hold things like forgiveness and gratitude and journaling and some of the things that maybe in your book might be very helpful for those who are struggling. So I want to also tell those who are listening that you can stay updated with Revive Ministries through the various platforms, ReviveMinistriesFL.com. This is goodbye from Revive Ministries Podcast, leaving with this last quote. Also just wanted to remind you that all the things that Emily shared will be in the notes if you want to know more. But this is from Maya Angelou, and it says, "You may not control all the events that happens to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them."